In 2023, according to data compiled by the U.S. Geological Survey, the United States imported more than half of its supply of 46 critical minerals. For 17 of them, including rare earth elements essential to electric motors and missile guidance systems, the figure was closer to 100%. The irony is quiet but persistent. The country that helped design the modern global trading system now finds itself structurally dependent on a rival within that very system. The question is not why Washington wants to reduce this dependence. The deeper question is why it has proven so difficult, even after decades of warnings, policy papers, and strategic reviews. Most people think the story of critical minerals is straightforward. China controls the mines. The United States fell asleep. Now, Washington is waking up, funding domestic mining, recycling and stockpiles, and diversifying supply chains. From this perspective, initiatives like the Trump administration's proposed Project Vault, a $12 billion effort to build a strategic stockpile of critical minerals, appear logical. If oil has a strategic petroleum reserve, why not lithium, cobalt, or rare earths? The logic is intuitive. Stockpiles cushion shocks. Domestic production restores autonomy. Allies replace adversaries. This view is not wrong. It is simply incomplete. It treats minerals as static commodities rather than as components of complex systems that accumulate power over time. It assumes supply chains can be rerouted like shipping lanes on a map, and it underestimates the role of contracts, processing bottlenecks, and institutional habits that quietly lock independence long before any mineral reaches a factory floor. To see the deeper mechanism, it helps to start not with a mine, but with a company. Consider MP Materials, the operator of the Mountain Pass rare earth mine in California's Mojave Desert. In the 1980s, Mountain Pass supplied much of the world's rare earths. By the early 2000s, it was shuttered. Environmental compliance costs rose. Chinese producers, backed by state support and looser regulation, flooded the market. Prices fell. According to USGS data, China's share of global rare earth production rose from roughly 30% in the early 1990s to more than 80% by 2010. This was the accumulation phase, capacity concentrated where costs were lowest and state support was most patient. Mines closed elsewhere, not because the ore disappeared, but because margins did. At the same time, China invested not just in extraction, but in processing. Rare earths are not rare in geological terms. They are rare in refined, usable form. Separating them requires capital-intensive, chemically complex facilities. By 2020, according to the International Energy Agency, China accounted for around 60% of global rare earth mining, but nearly 90% of processing capacity. Entrenchment followed quietly. Western manufacturers signed long-term contracts with Chinese refiners. Engineers optimized designs around specific material inputs. Universities trained metallurgists using Chinese-supplied oxides. Over time, dependence stopped being a policy choice and became an operational assumption. Even MP Materials, after restarting Mountain Pass, shipped most of its concentrate to China for processing until new facilities could be built. The ore was American. The bottleneck was not. Leverage emerges not from ownership alone, but from position. In supply chains, processing plants function like valves in an artery. Control the valve, and you do not need to own the heart. This is where the strategic significance lies. According to the Financial Times, China has repeatedly signaled its willingness to consider export controls on critical minerals during periods of geopolitical tension. Even when controls are not imposed, the possibility shapes behavior. Companies hedge, governments hesitate, policy space narrows. The consequences unfold slowly. Price volatility increases. According to World Bank data, lithium prices rose more than sevenfold between 2020 and late 2022 before falling sharply. Such swings discourage long-term investment outside dominant hubs. Stockpiles like those envisioned under Project Vault can buffer short-term disruptions, but they do not replicate ecosystems of processing, expertise, and supplier networks. A warehouse is not a supply chain. It is a pause button. This pattern is not unique to rare earths. it repeats across critical minerals. Cobalt offers a parallel story. Roughly 70% of global cobalt mining occurs in the Democratic Republic of Congo, according to USGS estimates. But more than half of global refining capacity is in China. Western electric vehicle manufacturers source Congolese ore, refined in Chinese facilities, financed by contracts written years in advance. Attempts to diversify face not just geological constraints, but contractual ones. Long-term offtake agreements lock inflows. Breaking them is costly. History offers echoes. In the early 20th century, the British Empire dominated global rubber supplies through plantations in Southeast Asia. Accumulation occurred through land and labor control. Entrenchment followed via pricing schemes and shipping networks. When supply was threatened during World War II, the United States scrambled to build synthetic rubber capacity almost from scratch. According to historical records cited by the Council on Foreign Relations, it took years and massive public investment to replicate what markets had optimized away. Oil provides another analogy, often misunderstood. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve works because oil is fungible, transportable, and supported by a global spot market. Critical minerals are different. They are heterogeneous. A neodymium oxide is not interchangeable with a finished magnet. The value is added along the way, at nodes that take years to build and certify. According to the International Energy Agency, permitting and constructing a new mine can take over a decade in advanced economies. Processing plants face similar timelines. Across countries, the same structural pattern appears. Accumulation favors scale and patience. Entrenchment favors standards and contracts. Leverage favors choke points. Japan learned this lesson in 2010, when a diplomatic dispute with China coincided with a temporary halt in rare earth exports. The event was brief, but its effects were lasting. Tokyo invested heavily in diversification and recycling. According to IMF analysis, Japan reduced its dependence on Chinese rare earth imports from over 90% in 2010 to around 60% a decade later. Progress was real, but incomplete. The United States faces similar constraints, amplified by size. Building domestic capacity requires not just capital, but coordination across agencies, states, and private firms. Environmental review processes, workforce training, and community consent all add friction. None of these are flaws. They are features of a system optimized for different values. The irony is that strategic urgency collides with institutional inertia. Quiet consequences ripple outward. Trade negotiations become constrained by mineral dependencies. Climate policy timelines hinge on battery supply chains. Defense procurement plans must account for materials sourced through rival jurisdictions. According to RAND analyses, certain advanced weapon systems rely on minerals with no current domestic supply chain from mine to component. Substitution is possible, but redesign takes time. There are contradictions here. Efforts to secure minerals for clean energy can increase near-term environmental pressure from mining. Stockpiling can stabilize prices, but also signals scarcity, attracting speculation. Diversification strategies often shift dependence from one concentrated supplier to a small group of alternatives, reproducing the same architecture with different names. Project Vault, in this light, is less a solution than a symptom. It reflects recognition of vulnerability within an existing system. It buys time, but time for what remains an open question. Building resilience is not just about accumulating material. It is about rebuilding capabilities that markets once deemed inefficient, processing plants, skilled labor, institutional memory. The unresolved tension lies here. Supply chains remember their past. They carry the imprint of decades of cost optimization and policy neglect. Rewriting them is possible, but never quick. Over the next 5 to 10 years, pressures will likely accumulate rather than resolve. Demand for critical minerals is projected by the IEA to double or triple by 2040 under current climate commitments. The arteries will carry more flow. The valves will matter more. The system continues to operate, quietly shaping choices. Each contract signed today becomes an assumption tomorrow. Each facility not built deepens reliance elsewhere. The question is not whether dependence can be reduced, but how much friction societies are willing to accept to change structures they no longer fully control. The minerals themselves remain underground, indifferent. It is the architecture above them that tells the story.